Welcome, everybody, to the Troubadour Show. Today I have Sharanya Rao. I got it?
Sharanya Rao.
Dang it. Yeah, I don't know why. Like I got it earlier before camera, and then like in my mind it switched to Rao. But it's Rao, like a row that you get with your ex
rowdy.
or something like that.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, Sharanya Rao. You are the artistic director of Leela. I want to see if I can remember this correctly. Indian Community Theater?
That's right.
Yes, okay. I wanted to say like interactive Indian, but it's Indian Community Theater here in Austin, Texas. But we know each other because you were the consultant or one of the consultants, I think there were two, for Mahabharata tales that we just did a couple months ago for Austin Shakespeare, where I played the role of Bhima. And I've had on the show several actors and dramaturgists from that because I've been learning a lot about Mahabharata. I love epic poetry, so very interested in that. So I thought we would talk about that. I thought we would talk about the theater in general, community theaters, you know, things, just all things theaters and its role in our lives and in society. But if you could introduce yourself a little bit in Leela before we get started with Mahabharata, I'd love that.
Absolutely. So my name is Sharanya Rao. I'm a third culture kid,
Yeah.
born in India, raised in Singapore, moved to the United States in my youth. And by profession, I'm a workplace coach.
Okay.
I coach people on their careers, leadership, and teams.
Okay.
And then another hat that I wear is as artistic director of Leela.
Yeah.
And so, you know, bringing coaching and theater together is something that I'm really passionate about. Mm-hmm. And it's how I bring my true self to work.
Yeah, because there's a similarity between coaching and being an artistic director, you think? Is that like that, especially with the kind of artistic director you try to be?
You know, that's a great question. I hadn't seen it that way necessarily. Okay. I see it as bringing two passions together. Right?
Okay. So
like
they're different.
My passion for coaching and my passion for theater.
Yeah.
Maybe the through line there is creativity.
Sure. Okay. So just going to Mahabharata where we met. So that was a performance of an epic, like a very small section of probably the longest epic poem in history. And it's like we're doing a version that is from someone else who did a famous version in I think the 80s, right? He cut it down into like 8 hours or 10 hours or something from this really, and then from there, Ann Chikalela and you had some help in guiding that, cut it down to like 2 hours. So we have that. So I was just curious, you know, because I've done a translation of the Iliad and I'm very interested in translations, how they're pushed on. I'm just curious, like what your role was in that. How did you help Anne? What were you doing with that? And what did you think of the result?
Yeah,
like the whole thing, because you saw it, I think twice, right? Or once or twice?
Yes.
Yeah, so hopefully you didn't hate it.
Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all. I thought Anne did a great job. When she first came to me, you know, a few months before that, and explained she wanted to do Mahabharata, you know, that I nearly fell out of my seat.
Because you know what it is.
I know what it is. Yeah. And, you know, personally for me, I hadn't put up Mahabharata because, you know, again, as a Hindu, you know, I wanted to be sort of true to the content, and there's a lot of content. Yeah. It is an epic poem, you know,
how do you do that?
Longest poem in the world. And so I never felt like I could really bring justice to stage, right? Because there are so many backstories. But how Anne explained it to me was she wanted to give little vignettes, right, of what happened from the Mahabharata. Then she called it Mahabharata tales.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I thought was a great idea, and that she could bring to a much bigger audience, right? And so we talked about kind of what were some critical scenes in the Mahabharata that sort of the must-have.
Yeah.
You know, that without which Mahabharata wouldn't be Mahabharata.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked about that and had discussions around what those were.
Well, can you tell us a couple of what you thought they were? Yeah. And I would be curious because I'm hearing this for the first time. So just for me, like, what was one that didn't make it that you're you really wanted it? So there's a couple, if you don't have that, that's okay. But like, there's a couple that are in there that are, you know, that you guys selected as like, this is what we need for sure. We can't have Arjuna not talk,
To Krishna.
at a little bit. It has to be in there at some point.
Yeah.
So that's like one that's at the centerpiece that you have to have. But other than that, what are like, you don't have to go through all, just one or two that you thought of. And then if you can think of one that's like the cutting room floor, I'd love to hear like one of those.
So I think there's a whole section where they lived in, the Palace of Illusions. When they weren't allowed back into their kingdom.
Yeah, they're going through the forest. This is Arjuna, Bhima, Yudhishthira, and the two brothers.
Yes. Yeah, and they had built this gorgeous palace. It's called the Palace.
Okay, I remember reading about this. Yeah, keep going. Sorry. I'm just thinking. I was listening to a podcast. I went through the whole thing.
Yeah. And so that part, didn't kind of make the final play, I think.
Wait, is this different than the one that got burned down? So the brothers are like in a house that's one of the enemy cousins.
Yeah, no, that's different.
Oh, that's different. This is maybe I don't know this one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, they're in a Palace of Illusions at some point.
It's a mystical place. There's a lot of beauty and splendor in that palace. But it's a conjuration.
It's all an illusion.
Yeah, because they didn't have any resources.
Okay, so it's like a mirage in the desert.
Akin to that.
Okay.
Akin to that.
There's more to it than that.
There's more to it than that.
Yeah, there's in epic. There's always, or any literature, there's always more to it than that. But but that's one. Okay,
that's
but keep going.
Okay. The other one is, I think there were a lot of heroes in Mahabharata.
Yeah.
During the war, the sons of the Pandavas who fought were not featured.
So they're not in there.
Yeah, and there are some beautiful stories in there, of bravery, of courage, and some of these were like kids going to war. I mean, we did see Abhimanyu fighting, but there was Ghatotkacha, and there were other heroes that I think didn't make it to the scene. So I think again, Mahabharata, it's a very layered story. There's a lot of backstories. And it's not a sort of clear black and white. And I think sometimes the danger is by simplifying a plot for stage, right, that is manageable, right, that you oversimplify something.
Oh, sure.
Right?
I mean, that's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
It has to happen just because of time.
Yeah. But if you dive into it, I mean, another example that comes to mind is, we're used to, or we see Shakuni as an evil character on stage, right? Who has dice that will give him whatever number he wants.
Yeah.
Well, there's a backstory to that, that Shakuni and his family was actually imprisoned by the Kuru leaders, right? Dhritarashtra.
Yeah.
And so, and what they did, they were terrible to them as prisoners. And they gave them enough food for one person, for the entire family.
Okay, I remember.
And so what they did was, Shakuni would give the food to Shakuni so that he would survive. And they had him, take revenge.
Yeah, so that he could be, so he's the embodiment of revenge.
And so the dice were made from the bones.
Ooh, no way. Okay, so that's how he had the power.
Right, he had the power.
And
they gave him a boon that, throw this dice, any number you want.
It'll always come.
It'll always come. And take revenge. Right? So interestingly, Shakuni was trying to help the Pandavas.
Yeah.
Right? Because he knew going to war meant the end of the Kauravas.
Oh, because he was trying to get revenge on the Kauravas. They were the ones in charge of that dynasty at that time when he was imprisoned and his family was... Yeah, so like that, of course,
so that's a backstory.
Oh, yeah, and that changes the whole
character,
vibe.
Right.
Yeah, because like the way it's played on stage with our version, and I think the Peter Brook version as well, is he comes out, he's clearly manipulating. And he's this evil. But in the story, he is still kind of an evil character. Just there's more to it than that.
There's more to
it. Right. It's like, I don't want to say this because it's going to be a spoiler, but because I just saw this TV show, The Last of Us, that I really liked. But just any revenge story, where it's like Count of Monte Cristo or something, where he maybe does some pretty bad things, but it's in the name of justice for the revenge. So it's like,
and Kirkit, that's life, isn't it?
Sometimes, yeah.
It's not always clear cut.
Oh, sure.
And we don't always have sort of one singular intention. People are not one-dimensional.
Yeah.
There's a lot of depth in characters. And I think that's why Mahabharata is still so relevant today.
Yeah.
Because society is complex.
Yeah.
People
Well,
have
I think
many
all
layers.
literature. Yeah. Yeah. All literature, I think that's one of the chief values that it has, especially as it develops, is that you can see the multidimensional aspect of humans, which we can't actually see in real life very easily.
Yeah.
Like it's really, I mean, unless you like marry somebody and get to know them over 10 years, it's really hard to see all facets of a person.
Yeah.
Like it takes a lot, but in a book, a novel, an epic poem, you can get a sense of it at least in, the equivalent of, 20, 30, 40 hours of reading, which is a lot. Mahabharata probably more like 150, 250 hours or something like that. I don't know. And one of the, even then it's like a truncated version, I think. I saw like a 16 volume set or something like that. I was like, wow. Yeah, it's a big book or a big series of books for sure. So it requires some adaptation, I think, for our sense. Okay, so that was one. Did you think of one that was like made it to the cutting floor, or that didn't make it into the play that you would have loved to have, or is it just that backstory is?
Yeah, I think some of the backstories, and like
That's
I said, I meant the heroes in the
the second one. Okay. So I mean that's so it's basically just like all this fluff, not fluff, but just this background like stuff.
I would say context
that gives you what you need.
That gives you a wholly different view of the Mahabharata.
Yeah, the more I dig into the Iliad, I see the same kind of thing because it comes out of. So I did a Kickstarter for this translation that I put together of the Iliad, and I've been reading it since I was a kid, and I love the Iliad and the Odyssey and all the ancient Greek. But one thing the Mahabharata taught me is what you're telling me now, which is something that was true of the Iliad too, that people today who read it don't maybe understand of how like there's this when Homer is reciting this in the 8th century BC, and then it's written down. Everyone in the audience is really familiar with all of the characters. They know Achilles is a folk hero who's, and everyone knows the story. They know he gets killed at the end. They do all that. And so that knowledge of the audience kind of shapes what he wrote. And it adds a lot of allusions. It adds a lot of material to people to have that knowledge. But a lot of times that gets lost over time. And that backstory is really important for the appreciation of an epic like that, I think. And that Mahabharata has the same kind of thing, because I think even though there is this, longer tale that's written, it does tend to be still, like even I think in the 90s, I heard about this TV show. It still is truncated a little bit. And like not everything. Is that true, do you think? Like where some part of it is not included in some new, reiteration of it in modern times?
I mean, I'm sure that's true. It would really be hard to capture the poem.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah, in its entirety. And, Mahabharata is considered our itihasa. Itihasa is history, as it was.
Yeah.
And so, I'm sure it is, we're trying to do what is humanly possible to show in a, audience with the limitations of theater and, and all of that. So I imagine that, is there, what is the true depiction of Mahabharata? You'll have to read it. And it'll have to be in your imagination.
That's because that's how it was meant to be originally. And I mean, was it read or was it recited over a course of days or something? Do you know? Like I said, the Iliad, Odyssey, that would have been an oral tradition, and there'd be a bard. It would be over like a day or two or whatever. You'd recite this epic poem.
Yeah, so it was recited.
Yeah, it was recited.
And I think we show that in the beginning of the poem.
Right? Yeah, you're right.
Where the sage is reciting it, and Lord Ganesha himself is writing it.
Yeah. Okay, so you worked with Anne to kind of first select these tales. So you had a really important artistic say in it, because it's like, that's what art is to me. It's like, select this, not that. So you were kind of artistically shaping it with Anne.
Well, Anne picked some of the main ones.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
And then asked for my input.
Okay.
So I was very much still a consultant in that process. Okay. And sharing with her my thoughts and views on, what would what had to make the cut.
Yeah.
Right.
Out of what she
was
chose,
important
you're like,
about
"Oh,
what
do this."
she, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But she really had the main hand in
Sure.
picking out like the stories and depicting and writing, and I was really in a consultant role.
Consultant. Okay. And then, so you would give feedback on that. What was the next step? Like, was it, because I remember you came to one of the rehearsals, or at least one, and you were giving us feedback on pronunciation and things like that.
Yes,
So
that
there's,
was very
but also like how, I remember you were talking about how certain people would act toward another.
Yes.
Which, to me is foreign, of course. So I wouldn't necessarily know these things.
Yeah,
So
because
that's
there's a lot
another
of
role.
nuance behind the, the character.
Yes.
Right. And again, it comes with the benefit of knowing some backstories, understanding the relationship and that kind of thing. So I think that was critical. And that's what she was looking for. Like, what are the gaps that, we might be missing in portraying this? And I think in some of the writing as well, because, she undertook an enormous task of writing down, and putting together that script. And to think about, how certain concepts would be conveyed, right? Particularly in the Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, during like, what is that? 600 pages, the Gita, and did like a page and a half or something. How do you do that?
How do you do that? What are some what might Krishna say if you were to, give a summary?
The Cliff Notes version.
What would he say?
This deep philosophical, influential text.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think that my input there was helpful in, again, giving the nuances, talking about language, talking about like translation of concepts too. Right? Because
that's
you
important.
can't take a literal translation of Sanskrit. You have to understand that like it's conveyed through imagery and sort of the layers behind that. So,
and there's like all phrases, like you could write like a whole page on a single word sometimes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the same thing.
And it's been done, in the Gita commentaries. They'll have like paragraphs and, paragraphs.
Just for one word.
Just for one word, one concept.
Yeah. Same thing in like, Odyssey, Iliad stuff. It's the same. I mean, that's part of ancient language, I think. It's just they haven't developed it in the way that we have, where it's got to kind of like, this word means that word means that. And you get the shadings through the specific relationships of words. And anyway.
Correct. And also in theater, on stage, you can show it. Even if you can't explain it, you can show it through your body language, through tone, pitch, how you stand, how you receive someone, how you, interact, right? It's all part of conveying the concept.
And that's one of the deep roles of theater itself, as opposed to reading literature.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of reading literature, but I'm also a fan of theater because this secondary, and I call it secondary in a good way, of like interpretation is really critical. Like if you just sat, as a hermit in the forest reading books all the time, you would be missing so much about human relationships in the world and existence, because you need to live it. You need to see it lived on some level, right? Yeah. And I think that's what a unique thing about theater, even more than TV and movies and cinema, is that the lived experience of it, and that what you're seeing is right in front of you as an embodiment of that particular person portraying in that particular way. And it's like, so I'm on the board of Austin Shakespeare, and the Mahabharata tale was done with Austin Shakespeare, which is the slogan, "The bard is only the beginning." But the idea of Shakespeare in this sense is like, we see it over and over again. And, so Julius Caesar, like I've seen a Julius Caesar before. We're doing that this summer, or Anne is doing that this summer, in Austin, Zilker Park for Free Shakespeare in the Park. And most people who go will probably have seen it before or read it or something like that. But the power of the theater is seeing how they do it in that particular way, even as opposed to a movie. Right. So a movie, it's captured in time as one singular thing that will never change. And it could be a great production, but the theater, it's like this one is going to be unique and different and unlike any other experience of Julius Caesar ever before and ever again afterwards, because it's that combo of people, that director at this time in the world and all that stuff. And that to me is what's so interesting about theater. But
energetic presence.
And the presence of human beings.
The energetic presence is what makes theater so special.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not only reimagining something or imagining something, it's an immersive experience. It's an interaction of energy.
Yeah.
Right, between the actors and then the audience. That, and I think even the script, right? Like I think at different times, if a script is layered enough, at different times it's going to spark different thought.
Yes.
So if you see Julius Caesar as a student, right, it's going to be a different experience from when you see it as an adult. And having
or I thought you meant like Caesar himself as a student, like portrayed as a student. But yeah, I get you. Yeah, you're saying like when you're 18, as 19 in college.
Right.
Yeah, or you're in high school and then you go and you're, I'm almost 40 and you're seeing it now. And I've just read it not that long ago.
It evokes something completely different.
Very different,
Yeah.
And I think, what the director chooses, like Anne is choosing to have Caesar as a man and all the conspirators are women. So that'll be an interesting dynamic of like showing that. And I think also like given what's going on in the country today, it's an interesting conversation. So there's that kind of it's still all the words of Shakespeare. I think she, just like all Shakespeare directors, they cut certain things out because the whole folio is just usually too long to do for a modern audience. But it's still, this is, a generic in the sense of the words are what are portrayed in most Julius Caesar's productions, but she's choosing something specific to portray. And that's what you do a lot of at Leela, right? So you're, now Leela, so tell me a little bit about the foundation of this Indian community theater. Yes. and what, like, who started it? Why did it start? What is it? What is it all about? Like, there's a lot of theater companies in Austin. What's Leela?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. I founded Leela in 2012.
Okay, you found it in 2012.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
At the end of 2012.
That's cool. So it's been around.
Yes.
Yeah, got some experience under your belt, and it's humming. So it's what, 14, 15 years, something like that almost. No,
13.
13 years.
Yeah, 13 years. And the background is that, when I first moved to Austin from Singapore, in Singapore, I was very involved in theater and, really active. When I came to Austin, I really didn't find a space for myself to get involved with theater.
Yeah.
Either, they were stories that I didn't resonate with, right? That I didn't feel connected to, or that they were for professional actors, and I had a full-time job and I couldn't, give that kind of commitment. And there were no spaces for South Asian narratives. And so, so for a while, I had looked around and I didn't find anything. And then, I connected with another friend. She's a film director today in New York, but she lived in Austin at the time. And we started, working creative collaboration together. And that inspired me, to get, reconnect with theater because I had been out of theater for a few years. And so as I started doing more theater, Frontera Fest and collaborating with, other theater groups at the time, Lucky Chaos, I realized more and more that, we needed a space for our narratives. And so that's really what led me to starting Leela with a group of my friends who also believed in the same thing. Yeah. And, we wanted a platform that Indians, a lot of us grew up with the mentality of, well, we have to pursue something professional. Either you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and creativity is something that's kind of a great side hustle. But
sure.
it's not
fun,
something,
but it's not a profession.
Yeah, that you really feed, right? Yeah. And so we've become these professionals and we feel a vacuum. We feel that creative vacuum and we need to fill it. And we realize it's important. But there's now no avenue for us to, really go out there and do something. So I figured, as I looked into my own community and I saw so many of my friends who, were successful professionals, but yearned for creativity.
Yeah.
Right. And I figured, well, if one person likes to write and the other person likes to act and somebody else can direct, then if you get together and collaborate, you can have a production.
Yeah.
And so that was the basis of Leela, that we would bring together South Asians who felt similarly and wanted an avenue to express their creativity, to get together and make magic. So that's how we started. And, at the time I was pregnant and
Wow.
yeah.
You took
And
it all on,
I
huh?
asked myself, is this really the time for me to start,
Yeah.
a theater company? And the answer was yes,
Yeah.
because I wanted to be in integrity with my daughter.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
didn't want to tell my daughter, oh, go pursue your, your creative passion. Mommy didn't, but you should.
Yeah.
Right? Because children observe you and they do as they see, not as you say. So I said, and I had to just let go of perfectionism. I had to let go of expectations and say, I'm going to start this. It is going to become what it's going to become. And that's that. Right. And so in the first year, we had a full scale production. We did a double bill. And then, after a while, so the team of us that got together all had kids together around the same time. And so we were all busy parents. So, we did more, sort of low key events like play readings and things like that. And it was really until the pandemic, I think, that really was a time of reckoning for me, where I, started to reflect on who was I really in my essence, what was really important to me. I had my own sort of professional reckoning, but then also, thinking about how creativity was a value for me. And I really had to put a stake in the ground for it.
Yeah.
I read the book, A Big Magic,
I've heard that
Elizabeth
one.
Gilbert.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. And it just made me realize that it was a value.
Yeah.
And that, without that, that was kind of a non-negotiable for me. And I had to just figure out a way to make it happen, right? I was a full-time professional, a mom, and then, and I had to figure out how to do this. And so we reconnected and regrouped. And then we started thinking about what was possible. And that's when, well, we'll talk about Anklets in the Boardroom, but around that time was when, I had an inspiration for Anklets in the Boardroom. But yeah, to answer your question, that's been the journey of Leela.
Yeah.
From, but it came from a place of passion, and it came from a place of wanting space.
Yeah.
Right. For important narratives.
Stories that aren't told. Yeah. Okay. So now Leela is billed as Indian community theater.
Yeah.
Anklets in the Boardroom. And is this the only one that is this forum theater or theater of the oppressed? Or is that the only one that's like that? And that's just one thing you do and you've done? Okay. Yeah. So it's not just forum theater that you're doing. This is just one.
This is one form of it.
So before we get into the theater of the oppressed / forum theater, whatever we want to call it, what other types of performances has Leela done?
Yeah. So Leela has done, there's classic theater, really. But I think what we focus on are South Asian narratives, right? Okay. What are stories in the community that we want to tell?
And it's all written by you, like the people in Leela. It's not, you're not
correct. These are
getting this from, New York writers.
No. Okay. The last production we did, is actually the first time we had, reached outside of our own community for a story.
Okay. What was that?
House of India.
Oh, House of okay.
Yeah, House of India. It's also written by an Indian playwright based in San Diego.
Yeah. Okay.
Deepak Kumar. But prior to that, it had been writers from the community. I had written some. I had collaborated with some other friends and written these stories. And so, but they typically focused on themes that were important to the Indian community in some shape or form, and were also broadly resonant.
Sure.
Right? Because anybody, although it's a South Asian perspective or narrative, you can see yourself in it.
Sure.
Because the theme is universal. Yeah.
So can you give me a little, like House of India, what's it about? What makes it, Southeast Asian versus something else?
Yeah.
As a narrative.
Yeah. So House of India in particular, written by Deepak Kumar, focuses on the life of, or, the immigrant dream.
Okay.
Right? And it's about...
And so it's applicable to a lot of immigrants.
Right. Exactly. It focuses on, the owner of an Indian restaurant.
Yeah.
Her struggles, being a surviving spouse. And the restaurant was her husband's dream. Right.
Yeah.
And how, and then how in modern day, how her restaurant is targeted by racism. And then her children are first generation, right? And so they have a slightly different view of, what needs to be done and whether to continue. And so it's an important dialogue, within families. It shows multi-generational perspectives.
Yeah.
That it shows family dynamics, right? Like something that everybody can relate to. And who hasn't been to an Indian restaurant? So,
yeah.
I think who a lot of people empathize with what it means to start a small business and to keep a family business going.
Yes.
Right. So while, again, it's a South Asian narrative with many universal themes.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there's sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say our previous productions, we've had Pants, we've had Brown Men Don't Swim. We've had...
I think I saw that on there. I was like, that's
Uninvited Guest. We've had a few where, again, these are themes that touch on everybody's lives and that everybody can relate to. But it's told through the lens of a South Asian narrative.
Yeah, so it's these stories that maybe are, some of them I don't know enough about the other ones, but it sounds like there's some part of, coming into a new culture with preserving old or traditional cultures from where you come from. So it has that perspective. And it seems like, and I only say this just because I just saw it, but the Leopoldstadt that we did, where there's with Austin Shakespeare, where that's actually kind of the story in a sense of the perspective of these Austrian, Jewish people over the course of basically 60 years or something, and showing all the different dynamics of them. But it's from that perspective of this one family in a sense. And it's that kind of, it seems like there's some similarities in the way that, and what's being approached. But this case is we're talking about Indian and other cultures in that region. Okay. So now I want to move into, I'm curious about this theater of the oppressed, theater or forum theater, because this is something that I actually had not heard of. So it's something I'm really new about and learning about. There's because I went to film and theater school. There's a chance someone mentioned it, I'm sure. I just maybe wasn't paying attention at the time. It seems very influential, especially in Latin America, where it's from, right? It's from Brazil. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And and I saw some examples of it. Yeah. So first, let's talk about a little bit what it is, how it's different than what we conceive of, or many of us might conceive of in Austin of theater, and so similarities, differences. And I'll let you go on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So just a quick background. It was developed in the 70s by Augusto Boal. And it was during a time of civil war and sort of political repression. And what he wanted to do was to use theater as a form of conflict resolution, as a tool of empowerment, right? Where theater isn't something that's sort of distant and sort of, has stage lights and, like a formal setting, that you're really making it a tool for people to use and to experience. And so it's a very immersive form of theater where, and there are some, sort of key principles. Like one, everybody's a protagonist. Literally, there are no spectators, there are spect-actors.
Sure. Yeah.
That's what he imagined. That it was very participatory and people, and it's a very co-creative process. There's also not a fixed script, right? That you can have a scenario, but then the audience may decide to change that. How he used it in street theater was he would depict oppression, right? And then he would invite the audience to come in and change something in what they were seeing. So the other aspect of it is, that there's no fixed script. That, it's a rehearsal for life, really, because, and this is something that's interesting that I kind of later learned as a coach. When I kind of studied more about what's the neuroscience of change, right? That the brain can't actually tell the difference between real and perceived. When they've wired up Olympic athletes, right, to see what are the muscles that fire when they're running a race versus visualizing running a race, they found it was the same. Because the brain is really just relying on sensory input to figure out what's going on, right? And so when you're making a change in a play that is more like a lab, right? Where then when you make that change, what you're actually doing is really developing some muscle memory for how to do that elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because again, the brain is not going to know whether this is real or perceived, right?
Sure.
And you're going to have that muscle memory. And so by people stepping into change, by becoming change agents, then they take it beyond theater, right? That was his premise.
Sure.
And that's what really, that's what we've seen. That's the power of the theater of the oppressed, that the audience is changed and transformed by their participation, in the plot.
So the model, so this is my understanding of how it works in terms of you have one coming up. So we'll talk about Anklets in the Boardroom. That's what that is. Do you prefer forum theater or theater of the oppressed? Because I've seen them applied to both.
So forum theater is a form of theater of the oppressed.
Okay, so theater of the oppressed has
expanded. Yeah,
okay.
There are different types. Yeah.
So would you call this theater of the oppressed that you're going to be doing?
Yeah, this is theater.
Okay, it's theater of the oppressed. So I want to ask about that in a little bit. But first, but the generic model, as I understand it, is, let's say, for this performance or any performance, you go, sometimes they're in classrooms, sometimes they're on the side of the street or whatever. It's wherever you can get a space, the audience would come. There would be some kind of scenario setup that's done with the actors. This could be, I heard 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes were the longer ones, right? And they just go play out this theater performance. So one that I saw was like a man who's, I think it was dealing with like homelessness and the causes of it in New York City. And this was on YouTube. And it was like one of the scenes was him losing the rights to his daughter, right? And that was one of the scenes, I guess, that led to him becoming homeless one day. And so the idea was you see these scenes as an audience, as a spect-actor that acted out with these actors, and then they would done with that part. And what's the next stage called?
So what we do is first we show what the scenario is.
You show the scenario. Yeah, so you kind of act it out.
Yeah, you act out the scenario.
So people have
so people know what this is about, right? Then we reenact it. And this time we invite audience to call stop. So when they can intervene at any point in the plot, they'll call out stop. Okay. And then they can intervene in a number of ways. One, they can tell the actors to change their lines, right, to say something else. They can direct the actor.
Yeah.
They can remove the actor and replace the actor with themselves.
Okay. That's what I saw.
Right.
So that the video I saw was the replacement.
Correct.
Because now it's there was a person, like I think she was the director, who was helping the audience with this, right? Because the audience doesn't know what to do, obviously. Yeah. Is that your role, or do you have someone do that for you?
That's right.
Okay.
So I am.
So you kind of get them pumped up and like getting excited to, because what she did was she actually, so this directing part, I didn't see that. So I think you mentioned that, but that's new to me and seeing this. So that's interesting. So the spect-actors can come and say, "Be angrier," or something like that, right? Yeah. Like when you're or
don't say that. Say this instead.
Yeah, say something else instead.
Yeah.
Or you can literally, as the artistic director, you can see if anyone will come up and just sit down. In this case, the example they had was the judge who was having a verdict on whether he would keep his daughter or not, keep custody of his daughter or not. And then people would do different things to try to elicit a different response from the judge. And then the artistic director came out and kind of pointed out what this person, like the method this person tried to do. So one of them was he had like a church member, he had a social worker have letters for the judge. And so what the artistic director said, and I thought this was really interesting, was, so you see what this spect-actor tried to do was garner help from the community to keep, and that's kind of a way of the training for social change in a sense, right? It's like showing, okay, so in this case, he tried to get help from the community. And in another case, it's like, being more, I don't know, measured in the way that they made an argument or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
What this opens up for the audience is agency.
Sure.
Right. And trying
their
out
agency.
Their agency.
Yeah.
Yes. Their agency in making a difference. In many scenarios of oppression, we're used to being bystanders.
Mm-hmm.
Or we witness something, we know we should say something or do something different, but we don't. Maybe we're frozen in the moment, or we avoid the situation, right? Because we don't know what to do. We don't know what are the right words to say. We don't know what's the right action to take. What this does is it builds kind of a lab for you to try out different things. What would it be like if I told that person to stop? What would it be like if I actually raised my voice? Right? What does that feel like? And when you think about it, people from communities that have not historically experienced power, right? They may not have the muscle memory of what it feels like to be powerful, right? And so cognitively, you know that maybe you should say something or do something different, but your body doesn't move.
Yeah.
In the moment, you're frozen, right? And so this is particularly, this being Theater of the Oppressed, is methodology is particularly helpful in helping people develop that muscle memory of what it's like to be powerful. How would I stand? What would I say? Is this like, should I use a louder tone? Should I get help?
Yeah.
Right? Should I reimagine this role? I mean, you could do a number of different things. I think another intervention is you add a character. You can add on a character.
Yeah.
Right? And so it really allows people to, one, experience what it's like to feel in their body, what power feels like. And two, gives them an opportunity, the entire community, and that's why the involvement of the community is so important. It gives an opportunity for the community to reimagine what this could be, right? How could we resolve this conflict? What can we try out? And it's not just one person making a change. Maybe it's several people in the plot making a change.
Yeah.
So you're reimagining the scenario, right? Which, real life doesn't always allow us to do, right? We have one chance at something, and then we have to
redo it. Sure.
Yeah, to redo
Yeah,
it.
yeah. You know what? So actually, a couple things come to mind in listening to you. So one, what I said at the beginning about your connection as a coach and artistic director for this seems very, again, when you're talking about it, it seems like there is a lot of connection, because that's, as a coach, that's what you would be doing a lot of, right? Is trying to help somebody. You said you're a professional coach, like you help, like career coach type thing? Or?
Yes, career coach, career leadership and team.
So you probably help people with even getting jobs, resumes, but also how to deal with employees, conflict resolution. So I bet some of your techniques are similar to what you're talking about here, where it's like you're not just, let's just think about it in our heads. Let's write it down. Let's role play it. Let's practice it. I don't know if you've ever had to teach someone or coach somebody how to fire somebody, right? But that's something that sometimes has to, how do you deal with that? How do you do that appropriately? And you might need to practice it and okay, I'll be one of my favorite shows is The Office. And there's like a scene where Michael, have you ever seen the show?
Yes.
Yeah. Like Michael and I think it's Dwight, and he's practice firing people. And he's such a jerk about it, right? He does all this, but you want to figure out, okay, so now that you did it that way, we're not going to do that, right? You're going to do it
What's
this
a
way.
different window?
Yeah, it's a different way of doing this. But there's a lot of value in sometimes even just getting out those other things in your imagination. And then here's a better way and why it's a better way. If you don't know that in advance, when you get there, then you are going to, make some horrible mistakes and do things you shouldn't have done, say things you shouldn't have said.
Yeah. Well, for me, Theater of the Oppressed, and particularly in Anklets in the Boardroom, it really is sort of my ikigai, right, of coaching and theater.
What'd you say?
Ikigai.
Ikigai. Oh, like you're Michael Scott.
Concept.
Wait, oh.
It's a Japanese concept.
Iki, is like ooh,
IKI.
Oh, okay. So this is a Japanese word.
Japanese.
So it doesn't mean what I'm thinking.
No.
Okay. I'm like, I said ikigai.
No, it's not an ikigai.
Okay.
Oh, I just thought of that. No.
Well, I was thinking like Michael Scott, because I just said Michael Scott. He's kind of ikigai sometimes, or a lot of times, right?
This is a different ikigai.
Okay.
This is a confluence of passion, purpose, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Your
this is your approach to coaching.
Well, no, that the ikigai concept, what I'm trying to say is the ikigai concept applies for me in this case because I bring in my skills in coaching, right, to create a safe space for the audience to even feel comfortable to participate.
Sure.
And then helping them think through how they want to intervene, right? Not telling them what to do, but helping them think through what they want to do.
Yeah, guiding about what would you do in this
and then I bring in my skills in theater as a director because, we are showcasing these stories, right? So there is an actual performance. I mean, this is not a workshop. This is a performance. So we actually have...
That's a difference between a workshop and a performance.
Yeah.
So the actors have acted out.
They have acted out.
Some of them try to have some improv skills.
Correct. They absolutely need improv skills.
Yeah.
I need to train the actors also to be flexible. Yeah. Right? Because when you think about it, actors are used to delivering lines.
Yeah.
And then in this case, you can't really hold on to it too tightly.
Yeah.
Right? In the first scenario you do, you act out as you would as a regular actor. And then after that, you have to be open because you could be replaced. Your lines could be replaced.
Yeah.
You might have a new character that you have to face. Or you might have the same character say different things to you, and then you have to respond.
Yeah.
Right? And not in an outlandish way, in what we typically see in improv and, comedic improv, but in a way that's natural.
Oh, more natural. Yeah, sure.
So it does stretch the actor. And my team of actors is amazing.
Yeah.
They have really sort of built in that flexibility and and creativity, and there's a lot of trust within the team of actors. One other aspect I want to mention about Theater of the Oppressed is it's also a way of learning nonviolent resistance. Because one of the key rules that I also maintain in Anklets in the Boardroom is that you may not touch another actor. Right? The audience, when they step in, they may not, slap somebody, hit somebody, or push somebody over. That they have to figure out a response without physically engaging with an actor.
Now I have to say, in my reading or study of this, just briefly, this is something that's because that's not what I saw in other theater companies. In fact, talking about Theater of the Oppression, is they were saying the complete opposite, not the slapping and stuff, but the touching they were very pro on the touching. So they want, that was part of at least one or two, I don't know if this is everywhere, but the idea was so one theater that was doing this was they wanted people to get comfortable with touching because that was a form of trust, so that you would get that trust with people around you, and particularly people in the troupe itself would be touchy with each other, just because it's so maybe that's not natural to or innate in Theater of Oppression. Was that just this one theater company or something?
I wonder if that's the case. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know, because I didn't realize that. I thought maybe that was associated with Theater of Oppression, because I do think some of the methods in it, correct me if I'm wrong, trust is huge. So having different trust exercises is really important, because you do need to trust the people on stage with you, your fellow actors.
Absolutely.
But not necessarily there's nothing touching is important because it builds trust.
I don't know if that as a principle.
Okay, so that's not a principle, probably, I imagine. Okay, so never mind. Thank you for correcting.
Again, it might be an adaptation.
Yeah, and it could just be that, I think it was, because one of the examples they gave, I don't remember what country they're living in, but they were saying some of the people they deal with sometimes come from a Western American culture where touching is completely off limits. And so they never, experience that. And in this environment, they do, specifically to help with this getting out of their box and things like that. And that's so.
So that brings up another kind of, key principle that in theater of the oppressed, we are talking about real world issues, right? So none of the imagining, it's, we're reimagining, yes, but in a way that's
that really
rooted
happened.
In reality. Yeah.
Like
real life problems.
These are stories that happen.
Yeah,
like
correct.
Like
you talked about homelessness. I mean, it's been used for immigration justice. It's been for bullying in schools.
Sure.
In Anklets in the Boardroom, we talk about workplace discrimination. Yeah. So these are all real world stories.
Yeah. So someone comes to you with a story in your community, and then you put it into this, you write, reimagine it, but it's their story.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So I imagine that, maybe in some contexts, like if you're talking about, I don't know, cultural assimilation, cultural adaptation, potentially.
Well, now I want to go rewatch but what I'm gathering and learning about this is that that's not one of the core principles, like the core of theater of oppression. Yeah. This touch thing. That's probably just that one theater.
Yeah. Maybe.
That's good to know. Okay, so Anklets in the Boardroom. So that's we've mentioned that a few times. That is theater of the oppression here in Austin. Theater of
the oppressed, yeah.
Oh, sorry, not oppression. The opposite of that. And it is. So it's happening in Austin. When does it happen? When is the production?
May 16th through 18th.
Okay, 16th, 17th, and 18th?
Yeah, so 16th, 17th,
three
and
performances?
18th. 3 performances at Austin PBS.
Austin PBS. Where is that?
Community room. They're off of Highland, in the Highland campus.
Highland campus. Okay. So I'll make sure to put a link to that
that'd
stuff.
Be great.
So make sure to check that out. And this is people buy tickets.
Yes.
Right. And how, is it a big audience hall? Is it medium, small? What are we working with?
Yeah. We're doing it in a boardroom.
Okay. So it's in a boardroom.
It's in a boardroom.
Yeah. To give you that feel of discrimination.
Yeah. Because it's an immersive performance.
Yeah.
Right.
So the tickets are limited.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have 60 per show.
Okay.
So it is small and intimate and designed that way.
Yeah.
Because people need to feel comfortable to go up and change something. And so, doing it in a big theater just doesn't have the same feel.
Yeah. So they're right there with the actors.
They're right there.
Right next to the actors. The actors are right here in front of them, and then they might just step on and do something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There is a little bit of a distance, right, between the actors and the audience, but not much.
Okay. So you said May 16th, 17th, 18th. Mm-hmm. You have cast already?
Yes.
You're still working on it?
We have a full cast. Rehearsals are underway. And then I try not to over-rehearse because I explained, earlier that there's a chance you can't hold on to it too tightly.
Yeah.
Because you will have to adapt and change. And so they rehearse enough to where they can deliver the storyline, right? And then stay flexible enough for the audience to come in and change something.
And how long is your quote unquote script, your scenario, the first one, approximately?
Yeah. So we're covering 7 stories.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's about an hour.
Oh, is that total?
No, the whole performance is 2 hours.
Oh, okay. So there's 1 hour of the scenario and then 1 hour of the interactive component.
Well, what we do is
scenarios.
Yeah. So the total time is 2 hours.
Yeah.
First we show the scenario, and then for the same story we
that makes sense.
Again,
yeah. You don't do all 7, then do all 7. Yeah. So it's you do one scenario. So are you able to reveal a scenario, or do you want to hold on to that?
Yeah, I'll have to hold on to that.
Okay. Do you want? Okay.
I can talk about general themes, but
yeah. So let's talk about a general theme. So this is all related to workplace discrimination.
Yes.
And you'll have one actress come out,
depict a scenario. So let me tell you a little bit about the process.
Please, yeah.
So the first phase of Anklets in the Boardroom really happens in story circles.
Okay.
Yeah, just to give some context, I mentioned in post-COVID, I had read a book called "The First, the Few, the Only" by Deepa Purushottamam, and it was about her experience of discrimination in the workplace. And she started interviewing other women and realizing that there were some clear patterns that was emerging. And so in her book, in How to Navigate Power in the Workplace, she talks about the power of circles, right? How through time immemorial, women have always gathered in circles for healing, for connection.
Okay.
And that got me thinking about how we could create safe spaces for women to gather and share their experiences of discrimination in the workplace.
Okay.
So phase 1 is really about reaching out into the community and inviting people to come and share their story.
Yeah.
And so we've done that.
That's what you've done. Yeah. That's what leads to the story.
Correct.
The story.
So from all of the stories that we hear, we look for stories that address common themes, right? We notice that there are some common themes that come up. And we think that telling this story will kind of touch on a number of different stories, right, with this same theme. So we look for stories with that kind of resonance. And then we get permission from the protagonist to share this.
Sure.
We take
From the
out all
storyteller.
of the storyteller.
Yeah. Okay.
We get permission to be able to showcase this in public. We remove any identifying information. We keep it confidential. We change all of the names. And, again, any identifying details. And then we create a script from these stories.
Yeah.
So these are all real life stories.
Sure. Yeah.
And then from the script, then I've hired a team of actors. And this is our second year doing this. So I already have a team of actors. We've had to recruit a couple of new people, but for the most part, it's the same. And then we reenact.
I know there's some from Mahabharata tales, right?
Yes.
Aren't there?
Yes.
Yeah. Isn't our Bhishma there?
Yes,
Is he
Bhishma is
there?
there.
He was the first person to do a podcast with me on this subject. So, okay, maybe we could do this. So we don't want to reveal the stories for this next one, but you can reveal the stories from the last one, maybe. Can you? Or not
some of them,
reveal.
yes, they're similar.
There's some, because there was also workplace discrimination.
Yes.
So, but people who might have seen the first one can still see this one.
Yes,
It's
because
still different.
each time. Well, here's why it's unique, right? Because some of the stories can be the same, and in fact, we've replaced one of the stories with a story from the Asian community, because the last time around we had created story circles for South Asian women. And this year, when we heard a lot of resonance in the Asian community, that similar things had happened to them, and so we invited them to join us in story circles and share their stories. And from there, we've picked one of those stories for this year's production. So there is some difference from last year's to this year's, but also it's different every time you watch it because the audience is different. What they may choose to do is different.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe last year if you came and you had an idea and you didn't get time, or you weren't able to execute on that, this year you can come and execute your idea, right? So it's a different experience. And we've seen, 2 enactments, of last year. We did 2 shows last year, so we saw 2 enactments of the story and 2 interventions, and they were quite different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you don't feel like you're having the exact same experience. You know, it's different.
Well, that's what I was saying. Even about theater generally is true, in the sense of even if you're seeing practiced performers, it's still different every night. There's still slight differences, even if they're like the top notch. Their voice might intone slightly different, especially if they're really in it, right? And there just might be some slight differences. And it's like, it sounds like theater of the oppressed and Anklets in the Boardroom, and specifically, has the same kind of thing, but even more so because you have now this added audience member.
He's a co-creator.
He's a co-creator
of the experience.
Yeah.
So you can come to as many shows as you like, and each time it's always going to be different.
Yeah, it's like improv in that sense too, where it's even if the improv is on the same subjects every night, it's just different because you might call the audience. I think a lot of comedians are doing this too with, they call it crowd work. And it's like different. And that's kind of what they become known for now. Like that's like a big thing at the moment, which I find really interesting. I was like, it's that what people seem to be yearning for, at least it might be temporary, but is this like desire for their engagement more. Yeah. Like there seems to be a real desire for engagement generally with every performer and experience they have. Yeah. Like I was watching this interview with Quentin Tarantino. He actually says that after his 10th movie, he's going to do a play because he's doing 10 movies because he thinks that there's certain things that's unique about plays and there's something special about the way that, you know, society's moving where, and I think this too, of like, there's a lot of opportunities for plays because I think people yearning also, not just for the engagement, but for, you know, everybody's home has this world-class theater system now, essentially, right? You could watch films that people 20, 30 years ago in a quality that 20, 30 years ago we couldn't have imagined with these big screens and nice sound systems that aren't that expensive. And so you can experience these great television movies really well, which is awesome. But then that kind of opens up a whole new desire for the communal type aspects, the engagement, the live part of theater.
Yeah,
that only theater can
talk about that.
Yeah, let's hear it.
What you've brought up is a really good point. And I think it's even more obvious in Theater of the Oppressed, the sense of community that builds.
Yeah.
When they're watching the same scenario and they're thinking about how to respond.
Yeah.
And
do they ever work together, the audience?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So it is amazing to see, Kirk. Like these are people who've never met and they just happen to buy tickets and come for the show. And in that safe space that we design, people become so comfortable to support each other. I mean, there was clapping, there was collective shock and gasp. There was, you know, cheering on and people would call out like, no, like say this. And people were getting really involved. Yeah. And they felt a sense of community, seeing the scenario unfold, right? And being collective agents of change. Yeah. It was a visceral difference in the room. Like you could feel the charge. Yeah. And you could feel the emotion. You could see the tears at some points. You could hear the laughter. It was so meaningful. Mm-hmm. And it got different people talking together. And I think for me, particularly with workplace discrimination, that is critical for different parts of the community to come together and put discrimination on the mat. Sure. Yeah. And brainstorm different solutions that, again, it becomes something that's, they become collective agents of change, and it is not a siloed dialogue. About discrimination. About workplace discrimination. Yeah. Yeah. So like, I would think one issue someone, or one reservation, I think some people who don't know about this might have, that I think you've already rectified, but we can make it clear. So a lot of us who've worked in corporations or something, we've had to go through these, what are they called? Like, I haven't worked for these types of, I've worked on my own for so long, but HR training. Yeah. Like HR training type stuff. And so there's some parts of it that is like, I don't want to do HR training, right? Like who wants to do that? Yeah, and some of them are so cheesy. And part of it's because it's like, it's a corporation, it's bureaucratic. So it's like, it's withered down, or, you know, to this most boring thing. I remember I saw one and it was like, for the last company I worked for, and it was like David Duchovny, I think. No, not David Duchovny, David Schwimmer was doing like sexual harassment. Yeah. And it was so absurd. Yeah. Like, I know sexual harassment happens, it's something that needs to be worked, but it was so absurd that it just took me out. Yeah. The way, not just that it was him, he was fine, but just the scenarios were like, or the way they did it. And I think, so what you're doing is you're trying to make it more realistic, because a lot of us have seen this type of thing, but we don't do it. And so there's almost this thing where it's like, you know, you get disembodied when you're in this HR experience where you like watch it and it's like,
I know sexual harassment happens, but I don't think it looks like that. Or it's almost like
You become
even
disconnected.
if you become disconnected. So like if you can see it in a realistic, which might be hard to see sometimes, but in a more like, oh, this, and then that it's a real scenario, not some like made up in a boardroom.
There's a couple of very key differences. Okay. Like, first of all, I mean, where do I begin? One, I think some of these trainings, like, take the humanity out of it. They try to make it a very neutral topic or a very clinical way of looking at something, right? Like whether it's harassment or whatever it is, right? Unacceptable behaviors. And this is about bringing the humanity into the scenario, right? Where you're really empathizing with another human being on their experience. Yeah. So it's very different. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is you're not passively watching something happen.
Yeah, you're part of it.
You are part of it. You have agency. You have choice on what to do, on what to say. You can change. That makes all of the difference. You being able to make a change and you being called upon to be a change agent. It's very different. So this is nothing like an HR training.
I don't think it is. I just wanted to point.
It's funny because I've actually been told by some folks who I think were from HR, just they didn't really. I mean, I guess they had just come in thinking it's a theater performance, and they said, "Oh my gosh, like this could completely change some of our HR training." Like,
well, I think it does sound like something that should go into companies.
Yeah,
in the sense of, because it seems like it'd be a much more effective way.
Yeah,
like Again, I have The Office on my brain, but there's like a sexual harassment episode. And I heard on a podcast, I don't know if this is true, but who knows, it's sold on podcasts, but that some companies do use that episode on sexual harassment for their sexual harassment episode, because what the episode of The Office is about Michael Scott and a few others, his friend or whatever, the traveling salesman has to take sexual harassment because they keep picking on Pam, but the thing that's interesting about it, it's a kind of meta situation, is they're making it a sexual joke, the HR thing, which to me, that was realistic, right? Like the making of it as a joke and then making it a sexualized, sexual harassment type joke. And then the way that like the quote unquote normies in the office, like the Pam and Jim, try to deal with it. And then they so like, it's a really interesting depiction of kind of reality of dealing with how to actually make this effective. They're not making it effective in the workplace. And then, that it's obviously just made for humor, but what you're trying to do is trying to have it some kind of an experience that you have, that you can empathize with these people as in people that in a sense. Like you don't maybe know that particular story, but you know stories like it, or you've been around it. And now the next time you see it, you can maybe be empowered or have the tools to do something about it.
Yeah. I want to take a minute to talk about the impact that the audience has experienced.
Sure.
I had folks who, I think I can talk about this more generally without revealing the plot, but it's about name pronunciation.
Oh man, it's always my fear. I try to get it right.
It's
hard.
Yeah, sometimes. And one gentleman, a colleague of mine, had watched it and realized that maybe he hadn't given enough consideration to one of his friends that he was calling by short, by a short name. And so, he went home, he talked to his wife about it, and they talked to their friend about like, what would she like to be called? More recently, he shared with me that he also happens to be a coach. And he shared with me that, he had a new client, on board. And he noticed that his client, had a Western name. Right. And he was Indian. And so he was just kind of curious about it. He said, well, is that your full name? Can you, tell me a little bit about your name? And he said, oh, well, don't worry about it. It's too hard to pronounce for you.
Yeah, I've heard that before, of course. Yeah.
And, my colleague said, well, I'd like to know. I'd like to learn how to pronounce your name. Mm-hmm. And he said, my colleague told me, Sharanya, the look in my client's face when I said I wanted to learn how to say his full name was everything. He said,
Sure.
I feel like it changed our relationship.
Yeah.
Even as coach and client, which is a really like close, intimate one, like that deepened the level of trust because that person felt seen and heard.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one example. I've had people tell me that they successfully negotiated for a raise.
Yeah.
And got it.
Yeah.
You're right. And so that's just using some of the lines, that they heard, and that they tried out.
Yeah.
And so there's real change happening through the showcase.
Yes.
And so I think, if you're curious, if you're, we ask you that you bring your curiosity, right? So if you're curious, if you want to experiment, and if you want to learn, what it's like to embody power and how to use power in different ways, then, come to the show.
Yeah.
Whatever race and gender you are, right? Everybody is welcome.
Yeah, sure. And, I saw like in one of the videos I saw, it was an African-American man who was, in that scenario of losing custody to his daughter. And it was interesting because they had like I think a middle-aged white woman replaced him at one point. And I think that seems to be part of the purpose of it, is also to kind of put yourself in the shoes of someone who's different than you. And
Correct.
And there's also, you could put, so it doesn't, somebody could be in the position of the judge.
Yeah.
And, like how, and there's all kinds of different scenarios, and that's part of the point of it. And so it seems like it's theater of the oppressed, forum theater. It's about, it's not theater for going and spectating on its own sake and contemplating what you're seeing. You're getting engaged. So
you're getting engaged.
That's the whole point. So if you're going there, you should be thinking about that on some level as a different kind of experience.
Yeah. And if you choose not to engage,
you don't have to.
You don't have to.
Okay, you're not forced. Okay.
And you can get curious about that.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, there's probably not time for everybody to get engaged, I would imagine.
Yeah,
right?
there is an opportunity, and we invite.
But not everybody has.
But not everybody
has. There's just no
to.
way to get 60 people to do
Correct.
this in an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, that's another thing. If you want to go just to witness.
You can absolutely go and just witness, and that will still transform you.
Yeah. So you're still viewing it in that regard. But it also might add something that there's a chance that you go up there, right? Like it's just that idea that you might want to go up there. So
it's an invitation.
Invitation, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we talked about Mahabharata, we talked about Theater of the Oppressed, Anklets in the Boardroom, May 15th to 18th, 16th to 18th.
16th.
17th and 18th, yeah. So it's coming up. We're recording this at the end of April. So, so you're coming up on this. Ooh,
yeah.
You ready?
We're in the thick of it.
Yeah, you're in the thick of it. So have you guys started your rehearsal, did you say? You have started, okay. But you don't over-rehearse, you said.
Yeah, we don't over-rehearse. Yeah.
Okay. All right, any last things you'd like to bring up before we say our goodbyes?
Yeah, I just, I love our conversation about how theater is really beyond just a stage. Theater, I deeply believe, has purpose. It has purpose in healing, in justice, in embodiment, in telling important narratives, right? And it's also a form of entertainment, right? All of it can be true.
Yeah.
And I think, how I see theater is really very much a form of, personal evolution, right? Because you get to be creative, try on different roles, and walk away with a deeper understanding of yourself, right? And the world around you.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And hopefully you go see Anklets in the Boardroom, which is it because the image I saw was of an anklet.
Yeah.
What is the meaning of that? What does it represent actually before we say goodbye?
Yeah. Anklets represent tradition.
Oh,
right.
Got it. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Culture.
Okay.
And it's sort of that juxtaposition of,
like
culture. And
East Asian culture or just Indian culture?
Yeah. Indian culture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What is can you tell
maybe
me?
in Indian, I don't know about in East Asian, but certainly in Indian culture.
So can you tell me what it is real quick, actually? Like what? So it's tradition. No, no, sorry. I know what an anklet is, but you're saying it's representative of some like culture in general, or is there a specific thing about it? Is it just like something that's common in India, East Asia, but it's not common here? So it's like, is that what that is about essentially?
Well, it really represents, us being ourselves and fully ourselves at work. Because we come with our cultural background, our cultural perspectives. We want to be able to bring our whole selves to work.
Yeah, right? and kind of like the business suit is kind of the eradication of and the unification of everybody into a kind of pigeonhole, right? Where it's like you lose some of that identity and you like wear the business suit.
Yeah, well, you're judged for wearing anklets in the boardroom.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
You're judged for not conforming.
Like there's that famous painting, and I cannot remember who, but it's the business suit with the apple in front of his face. Have you seen that?
No, I don't think I have.
Oh, it's very famous. I have to send. I'll put it, but I wish I remembered the name of it. But it's like a very famous because it's just the faceless suit essentially, right? And I think that's what I think our culture is kind of getting away from that a little bit, where there's outside of Wall Street, there's a little bit more of your individuality that is encouraged in more and more businesses today, which I think is good. You should want individuals and their thoughts. But anyway, so that's what Anklets represents. Yeah. That's cool. I like that. Yeah. That's a good, simple image.
Simple image
that represents
that we want to bring our whole selves to work.
Yeah.
And that the system needs to shift
a little bit
in order to embrace that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirk. This was really great.
Yeah, this is fun. Great. All right. We'll see you next time.